my beautiful friends. I'm your host, Leah Roling.
And I'm Cari Kenzie. Welcome to Shift Happens. Discover the leader within. This podcast is designed to disrupt the way you live, lead, and love. At iShft, we challenge traditional narratives and believe that inner wisdom is the key to every decision.
Are you ready to explore a new paradigm of both living and leading? We'll dive deep into our innate strengths as women: compassion, curiosity, intuition, grace, vulnerability, and love. The shift, it's about to get real. Rediscover the power within and transform your life. Stay tuned. It all starts now.
Hello. Welcome to another Friday. All right, I'm going to dive straight into it this week, okay? We're just going to call it like it is. And what I would say to that is most of us aren't actually looking for truth. Sounds a little crazy, but we are actually not looking for truth. We're looking for proof. We want proof that we're right and proof that we have been doing it right all along. Proof that our identity, our choices, every deeply held belief we have is solid. It's exactly where it should be. Because let's be honest, if we started to challenge everything that we thought we knew, what would that mean for the life that you've built around it? Leah and I've actually been sitting with this one lately through conversations and through client meetings that we've had. And I've got to tell you what, that it is absolutely a game changer if you start asking this question. What is the truth that I am looking to confirm? What's the truth that I am looking for or needing to confirm? Because once you see it, it's like Dorothy's slippers. They've always been there and you can't unsee it. It's the justifications, the stories, and the way that we twist logic, the way that we twist perspective in order to fit what makes us feel safe. And it's not just personal, you guys. It is actually biological. You hear us talk about this all the time, but your subconscious mind, that thing that sits in the back of your mind, is wired not to seek truth, but to protect you from that discomfort of change. And that is going to mean, and it might mean, living inside of what I'm going to call a reality filter and keeping yourself right at the cost of authenticity and real awareness. So this is what we are going to crack open today. We are going to dive into one of Leah's favorite topics, neuroscience, the neuroscience of cognitive dissonance and why your brain constantly fights against new truths and how to recognize it when you are stuck in a justification loop. Because if you actually want to grow, and our assumption is that if you are joining us this week, if you have been here before, if you continue to come back, that you actually want to lead in life, in business, and in your own dang mind. And if that's the case, then are you willing to challenge the stories that you're holding on to? That's the question. Are you willing to challenge the stories? Hi, Leah.
Hi, Cari. I'm very giddy. I'm
Little topic.
Oh, what? So before we dive in, because I'm very anxious to dive into, cognitive dissonance and the reticular activating system and the default network mode and all of these things, right? Like all of it. But before we do that, I think this conversation, as Cari mentioned, if you're listening, it's because you care tremendously about how you show up in the world. You care tremendously about how you lead your life, how you lead your family, how you lead your businesses. And yet it's super important in this conversation and in all the ones that we have, that to the extent that you lead yourself is the extent that you can ask other people to follow you. If you have no idea where you're going, where are you going to have them follow you to? Right. And I think to the extent that we lead ourselves, falls prey on the extent that we lead our mind. Right? And so we have to understand the mind a little bit. I mean, you don't have to go all neuroscience nerdy to understand the mind, but you do have to understand the mind just enough to understand that it is both your biggest asset and biggest liability at the same time, because your brain can be a big fat liar. And when we understand that, when we understand that all of our limitations are really just the belief that we hold true about ourselves, right? And in knowing that, we really get to understand, what this truth is and what it isn't. And we get to question all of it, because as Cari mentioned, we work a lot with clients that are trying to prove something, trying to prove themselves to be right about something that they don't even want to be right about. And so where do we go from here, Cari?
Well, it's interesting that you're right. Like the subconscious mind, one, I think it's wickedly creative. Like I don't think we give our minds enough credit for how amazing and brilliant and the stories it weaves and the justifications that we pull forward in order to keep ourselves safe in the identity that we have built, safe in the reality that we've built, the reality of our family life, the reality of our business, the reality of who it is as we step into our business, right? It's all these stories that we've created, and the mind does a meticulous job of weaving perspectives and only allowing you to be able to see the things that justify it back, that prove that it's right. Right. And so I think that one, like if we could just give it some credit. Wow. Okay. And then two, when we look at this, I mean, this topic kind of came forward based on a conversation that I had with a client a couple of weeks ago, right? Of what is that truth that you are looking to confirm? Now, I want to tear down this word truth here real quick, because there's many truths. There's many truths, and you have a lot of truths that you justify in your own mind, okay, that actually aren't true. Like you said, they're not true. So when I asked her that question, I said, you've been talking and I'm listening and I'm hearing this conversation and I'm hearing the situation that you are in within this relationship. But I got to ask you, like, what is the truth that you need to confirm? What is the truth that you're trying to confirm in this? And her mind immediately went to, well, maybe I'm trying to confirm that this isn't the relationship I'm supposed to be in. And I said, no, that's not it. And she goes, why? And I said, because if that's the truth you were trying to confirm, you wouldn't be in the relationship to begin with. So that's the piece I want to break down first, of like, it's the truth that you think you will always justify as righteous for you. Right? And that's what she did in that moment. She justified it as righteous, of, oh, well, then I just must be needing to prove that I don't belong here. Or I just must be needing to prove that they did this in a way that caused a problem. It caused a kink in the system. We lost a client because of it. Name it, right? That's what I'm trying to prove. That's the justification. When you start to peel away the layer of that and go, no, honey, what sits underneath that? What's the truth that causes you to be in a relationship, that causes you to believe that you may not belong there? Those are the truths that we need to get to. Too often, and you and I had this conversation, too often we don't dive into that because, one, we want to be right. And then I threw out the word righteous, and we were like, ooh. And I was like, not only do we want to be right, but we also want to be righteous, because nobody wants to step into blame. Nobody wants to take on the shame of a decision that was made, or of a truth that if I were to speak this out to somebody else, they would go, that's crazy. But that's the truth you're looking for. What would you say?
No, I mean, I think that, I mean, sums up in simplifying the subconscious mind, right?
Mhm.
It doesn't just want to be right, it wants to be righteous.
Mhm.
And when we speak to the cognitive dissonance of it, that is that is something of identity, right? That cognitive dissonance kicks in when reality, what is, challenges your identity, right?
Yes.
You know that you're in a cognitive dissonant state when somebody says something to you and you immediately want to justify it, argue it, explain it, defend it,
Mhm.
right? Because it goes against everything that you claim that you are, and you'll reject it, right? You'll reject it and you will place blame squarely on them. If somebody challenges you as a mom,
Mhm.
right? Somebody challenges you as a leader, if somebody challenges you as a friend, and you have an identity of being a good mom,
Mhm.
if you have an identity of being a good leader, if you have an identity of being a good friend, you're going to want to reject that, right? Even the most growth minded of all humans are going to want to reject that because they have placed their identity on being good,
Mm.
on being good, because we were raised, be a good girl, be good,
Mhm.
right? Because that is what we believe is the value of our life,
Mhm.
right? And so instead of considering that maybe there's an opportunity for us to grow in our way that we communicate and connect with our team or our kids or our friends, instead of that being a reality, we place blame and we justify that it's their fault, that they just don't appreciate it, they're not respectful, they're lazy, they're all of our judgments,
Mhm.
right, that we place onto them, when actually they're just an extension of the work that we believe to be true about ourselves, because we wouldn't see it in somebody else
Mhm.
if it wasn't in us to see, that we are unwilling to do, because in our subconscious mind it doesn't know the difference, right, between, right, uh actually surviving who we are as an identity and being able to shift characteristic traits,
Mhm.
because it's all wrapped up in the same identity. So I wanted to bring that forward and have a little conversation about that. What are your thoughts?
Well, it speaks to, well, there's two things. One I wrote down. First, I'll say it speaks to that identity versus authenticity,
Mhm.
right? And in that, when we're challenged in an identity based on somebody else's perspective of what they require
Mhm.
for their gap, so to speak, right? Then when we justify, when we defend, when we do those things, it hardens or creates a stronger foundation in an identity of where we need to prove our value, as opposed to stripping away an identity so that we can live authentically. Because when we do that and we live authentically, I understand the value of what I bring no matter where I am and who I'm speaking with. That doesn't change based on your requirement of an identity that you see of me. But in that justification, what I wrote down that I thought was interesting is that I will place on you the work that I refuse to see in me.
Yes. Yes. Say that one more time.
Right. I will place on you
Yep.
the work that I refuse to see in me.
Yes.
That is a hard pill to swallow. And that is where all of the magic happens,
Yes.
right? When you have the ability to sit back and unravel whatever truth you've placed on that situation, whatever truth you've placed on another individual, right?
Yep.
When you do that, you get to peel away that outer coating of an identity that blocks you from authentically showing up. And that's all people want.
Mm.
That's all people want.
what I wrote down, and it's so brilliant, but the world reflects what you believe about yourself,
Yes, it does.
right?
Yeah.
And so I will just give this example because I hope that stories and examples bring this conversation to light, because it is hard work, but it is the work that's required for us to lead more effectively, right?
Yeah.
If you want to lead differently, we have to lead our mind differently, which means we have to be willing to allow for these limitations that we have refused to look at, and denied ourselves of the opportunities that lie on the other side of these limits. And instead of projecting our limits onto other people in order for us to feel better, we get to remove these limits from ourselves in order to truly feel better. And so I will tell you the story about my son. He's my oldest son. And up until probably 8, 9 years of his life, we would all collectively agree that he was the hard one, that he was the one that was always going to push the boundaries, that he was always going to be the one that if there was a line that was set, he wasn't just going to hit the line, he was going to go across that line. Everyone would tell you that he was the hardest. Everyone would tell you that he was the difficult child. And I had a coach one time beautifully challenge me, and she said to me, how does believing that story affect your relationship with your child?
Mhm.
The one that he's hard and difficult. And I was trying to sell her, like, oh, you don't understand. No, he really is. Everyone would agree. Just ask him. And 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 she said to me, what would happen if you were wrong about that truth that you wanna so desperately believe to be true? What would be wrong? What how would that affect your relationship? And what would you have to believe otherwise? And what is it about you that needs him to be more like you
Mhm.
so that you feel like you're doing a good job as a mom? Well, that brought up all the things, right? I'm a people pleaser. I'm the good girl. I stay in the lines. I don't push boundaries, or I didn't then,
Mhm.
right? I don't disrupt, right? I color perfectly, in quotes if you can't see me. This is not this child, ever, ever. And instead of seeing him as who I thought he needed to be so that I felt good, I allowed him to be him. And it completely changed my entire relationship with him. Completely. I would not have the relationship that I have with him, nor would he be one of the most brilliant young entrepreneurs that never met a stranger and drives in fear every single day with so much courage. It's ridiculous. I would not have that relationship. He might not be this way because I would have smothered it. I would have smothered it trying to get him to be more like me and less like him. And how often do we do that? How often do we do that in our friendships, in our teams, thinking that if they were just more like us, if they thought more like us, if they followed our process more like us, that they would be better? And how often does that create ridiculous amount of havoc and struggle in our businesses and in our families?
Before you even stepped into that story, which is profound and so incredibly true, I wrote down this, and it's fascinating, and I love how things just kind of pull themselves together. But I said, identity is the greatest block to your growth.
Mm-hmm.
Identity is your greatest limitation.
Mm-hmm.
And so for you to bring that story forward just brings that home in a beautiful way. Because in the way that you place this identity on him, you've also placed identity on you. And it created a limitation in the ability that you had to show up for him and him for you, which again is non-discerning, because then that's just the way that you show up in life. Limited.
Yes.
Limited. Identity creates a box,
Mm-hmm.
right? Identity creates something that I have to sit within in order to, right? Because the only way that you can reach that level of greatness is to have kind of, it reminds me of like when people are fundraising and they always put that thermometer on the wall, right? And you color it
Yeah.
in. And then as you're coloring it in, you know the level that you've reached. And then you can kind of shoot out the top, maybe, right? But that's an identity. An identity creates a barrier and a boundary around the amazingness of who you are. You don't get to share and express in authenticity, right? You get to define within the realm of the mother role, within the realm of the CEO role, right? As the CEO, as the owner, as the you name it, right? I do these things because this sits within my container, right? And they do these things. And it's time we shed all of that. We have to tear the whole thing down because you had not allowed him to just be who he is. Like you said, he would not be the individual that he gets to show up to be authentically in everything that he does. That kid is not contained within an identity, period.
Period. I get goosebumps. No, he is not.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you allowed it to tear down in your mind, which allowed him to be beyond whatever identity had been set.
Yeah. And so just to bring this full home, right? How many times do we unconsciously, right? Which is why we are always reminding you all to bring forward conscious awareness. That's the first step in all of this work that we're inviting you to do, is to be conscious, because certainly unconsciously, or certainly consciously, I wouldn't have chosen that type of thought and that type of judgment and that type of boxing him into the identity that I felt he wanted to be, right? But it was the identity that I needed him to be so that I could be seen outside in as a good mom. Because what part of me didn't believe that I was a good mom? I needed external validation to prove that I was. And as he was pushing boundaries and as he was challenging the quote unquote authority figures in schools and things like that, I would get called. And I made it mean that I wasn't a good mom because a good mom would keep him checked.
Yeah.
Right? And how often do we limit other people around us because of our own limitations? And I would say 1,000% of the time we do that. Every limitation that we have, we place on other humans. Unconsciously, of course, that's the work we have to do to shift the limitations so that we are not continuing to limit humanity.
Well, and here's the thing, to bring this, like you say, to kind of pull this back around full circle. What is the truth that you need to confirm? What is the truth that you are looking to confirm? Right? And for you, at that time, if somebody had said to you, what is the truth you're looking to confirm? You never would have said that I'm a good mom, so I place this limitation on him. You wouldn't have said that. Now that you look at it, you're like, that is nuts. That is absolutely crazy. It makes no sense. When you ask that question, what is the truth I'm looking to confirm? Look for that response.
Yeah.
Because once you get the response of, well, that makes no freaking sense, you hit it. You hit it, because that subconscious thing will make everything make sense in order to keep you safe, in order to keep you limited. Right? So I think it's absolutely brilliant. I love that you bring that story forward, because what is that truth you need to confirm? Once you release that, once you were like, I'm a good human. I'm a good human. And if I show up as a good human, as love, as you do, that gets to be expressed for me and gets to show up in everything that I do without limit.
Yeah.
And it released the limits on others.
Yeah. And the other beautiful thing, and I know we're closing in time, and maybe this is a part 2 episode, but we also have to know, because we have this reticular activating system, we call it the RAS, that you will find proof of what you think. It's the gatekeeper of your attention. And so for sure, I would find evidence of all of the places that my oldest would be pushing boundaries. And trust me, I found it. But what was very interesting, when I dropped that needing to prove myself right by limiting him, what I found, which was very fascinating, is you know what? My other two children, they push boundaries just as much. I just didn't have the thought that they did. And so I didn't look for it and I didn't find it. You will find what you're looking for.
Yes.
So if we can leave you with anything today, know what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Know what you're looking for and challenge it if it's not actually what you want.
Yes.
Right? Because if it's not what you want, but yet it's what you believe the truth is that you're trying to prove, that is all you will find. And you will be miserable and exhausted in the process. Validated, righteous, maybe.
Yep.
But how's that working out for you?
Right.
Okay.
Oh, we're going part 2 on this one. I love it.
Part 2. Okay, friends, close us out, Cari. Thank
so
you.
Great. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for just showing up for yourself consistently. Continue doing it. Continue doing the good work. Continue asking the questions, and life will continue to open and reveal itself to you.
Yes, I love it.
See you next week, friends.
See you next week. You have been listening to Shift Happens. Discover the Leader Within with Leah Roling and Cari Kenzie, where we help you reconnect with your inner leader. Learn to trust your instincts and live with authenticity and confidence.
Tune in every Friday at 11 a.m. Central Time to Shift Happens on Transformation Talk Radio for more insights, inspiration, and actionable strategies to live and lead, not only in purpose, but on purpose. It is time to embrace a life and leadership style that is true to you. For more information, visit shift.life.